snaps a twig off a branch above him, and he tells the commander his knights are garbage. Their training is trash. The troops aren't being strengthened. They're just being babysat and wasting time. Duds gets offended, obviously, and was about to curse at the boy, but in the blink of an eye, the kid is behind him. Habel barely gets his sword up in time, and he knows if he hadn't, he'd be dead. He just blocked a killing strike from a stick. The kid smiles, then he lets go of the branch, and the commander's sword goes flying out of his hands, gone, disarmed by a twig, in front of every single soldier under his command. The kid says he's impressed by the commander's lack of skill, couldn't even defend himself against someone useless. Habel drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness. While his men are frozen, their commander is on the ground groveling in front of the prince nobody respects. Now this dude real name is Baron. He used to be a king, the king of a nation called Sacritia. He fought a war against the kingdom of Kyrus, a war over an artifact called the Axis of Time that could literally rewind history, and Kyrus burned everything to the ground. Baron everything to those goons of Kyrus when he was surrounded by enemy mages alone with nothing left but a sword and one arm. They lasered my poor bro and then he woke up in a soft bed surrounded by servants inside the royal palace of Kyrus, the kingdom that destroyed him. Yeah, bro is inside the empire of the dudes who cooked his crew. He's about to burn this place from inside out and kill every single nigga in sight, cause he's in the body of Callion, the third prince. Problem is that this dude is the weakest, most hated, most pathetic member of the royal family. At least he got this maid that I thought was a girl at first but is just a breedable femboy. Right after bro was eating and chillin' thinking about his new life. But in this house all three princes eat together by the king's orders. When this dude named Planche who thinks he's on One Piece or some shit with that jacket over shoulder at 7 AM walks in. Our boy used to be that dude that just lowered his head, but bro looked dead in the eyes and said, "Yo bitch, what's up?" Planche, being that well-mannered dude he is, suddenly just grabbed a knife and threw at our boy's side femboy to pierce his skull. But bro just caught midair at like nothing, walked to his side and told him, "Careful bro, next time it can end in your face." Brother was just stunned. Did I got roasted by the trashiest dude of this place. Now things aren't that smooth because something almost went wrong. When the knife came at him, he nearly used aura on instinct. The reflexes of an aura warrior who'd spent his whole life on a battlefield almost exposed him in a dining room. But then he felt something he didn't expect, a sharp pain in his chest. Not from the knife, from the inside. So he checked, and what he found changed everything. 3 mana circles around his heart. This body isn't just some weak prince, it's a mage's body. 3 circles already formed. That's serious talent, but also almost a curse. Bro spent his whole life grabbing thick swords and now he has to cast balls, which is a problem. Because every time he tries to use mana, his chest feels like it's being crushed. His body is losing weight rapidly. He can barely run 3 laps around the palace lake without almost collapsing. His nose starts bleeding randomly. The royal tailor, the guy who measures him regularly, says he's getting thinner every time. A body with 3 mana circles, and the royal dragon bloodline blessing should be healing itself constantly. It should be getting stronger, not falling apart. But that's happening because this kid is being poisoned. And it's not a small dose. Whatever's in his system is strong enough that without the dragon bloodline burning through it 24/7, he'd already be dead. This isn't some random assassination attempt. Someone has been poisoning RG day in day out. But who? Bro thinks in the original timeline this boy died at 15. They said he tried to poison the queen and then hanged himself. What if that story was always a lie? Speaking of suspects, it was then that our bro smelled someone coming. Literal dog behavior. This bitch is Celeste, the current queen. From the eye color must be his stepmother, and holy shit she's perfect for that stepson niche with those thick lips. And of course she goes directly to our boy, saying that lately he's looking very grown and healthy. My bro drops a pun line on her and says, "I didn't grow much, you'll see how much more I can grow in the future." Yeah, that's the direction I like my stories to go. Words that made the atmosphere turn heavy. The Viscount said he barely recognized him since he didn't usually even show his face. He'd definitely become a very tall man. That's when the queen cut him off. Who would have thought? The Viscount really is a lapdog, just like the rumors said. The queen asked why Planche hadn't told her about the horse that doesn't obey him at all. It would have been good if he'd reported it. But Planche said she already knew. Soleil said he'd lost control of the reins, and her son said the horse was useless. He got up and left the table right away, leaving his cursed mother furious. 3 weeks later, it was time for the king's birthday celebration. The king, who's basically his wife's doormat, like everything in that palace. The common people are excited about the festivities. Everyone wants to see the princes. While they were getting the kid ready, the tailor got really worried. Blood started running from Killian's nose. All the servants panicked over the sudden nosebleed. The butler asked for compresses to help. The prince said it was nothing, that he'd just been sleeping badly. But since the tailor measures him often, he said the boy had lost even more weight. Killian tried to change the subject, and said he'd been exercising too much. That's why he'd dropped so much weight. As soon as the tailor left, the butler quietly asked if today was the day. No matter what happens, before rumors about Cillian's health spread, he needs to meet Ellen, not Musk. Because of delays in the king's schedule, he'll have to see his sons one by one. The kid doesn't have time to waste, and wishes his father would just talk to everyone at once. A private meeting wasn't what he'd been expecting. King Romain is reading documents, and the prince announces himself, but the king acts like he didn't even notice, like he ignored the whole thing. That's unbelievably rude, Killian thought, until the king told him to sit. The king asked generic questions and said his son looked fine. Suddenly it all made sense to Killian. Now he knows why the king wants to see his sons alone. This way he saves time for real, because he doesn't have to actually talk or ask anything. What a mess of a family. A father who doesn't care. Apathetic brothers, a wonderful place. Planche's just arrived, and he's already drunk, with zero manners. The person most interested in that meeting is the queen, who has enough power to keep her own husband under her thumb. And in the middle of all these people, someone wants the prince dead. It's time for him to work out who the killer is. Because of the celebration, the prince showed up in front of everyone looking like someone different. His presence is already outshining Prince Plancho, who's just a drunk. The nobles are talking about it, starting rumors. Callian finally entered the hall, leaving all those background nobles impressed. The rumors are real. The black-haired, red-eyed prince who looks like Sifanian. He cut his hair, his face is fully visible, and he's even wearing a crimson brooch. It's a quiet statement that he's done hiding. The butler went up to him to ask something. He wanted to know why everyone was staring. He even thought it might be because the prince was dressed so well. Callian knows those jewels are drawing attention. It was all the tailor's doing. The butler's family is also from Kyrus, but from a small inland town. The prince asked if they'd come to the capital, and the butler said they'd need an invitation. Since the prince got too personal, it looked like the butler was about to snap, but he tried to change the subject. The prince is waiting for the right moment, because there's someone there he wants to meet. He asked if the butler knows why that place is called Siegfried Hall. It was named after the first patriarch of that surname, one of the great heroes. They've been loyal to the royal family for 500 years, defending that territory. In his past life, the prince liked hearing that story, and the person he wants to meet is in the middle of that hall, Duke Siegfried, who looks incredibly powerful. Long, loyal traditions. Those are the kind of people the prince likes. Using a bit of mana, he tried to see if the man was sharp, and he got noticed immediately. The test went exactly as expected. The butler realized the duke was looking at the prince. He's one of the 5 great swordmasters on the continent. For now, the prince will act like nothing happened. In the middle of the hall, the king thanked the guests for coming. Callian was already outside with his butler. The kid managed to tame that stubborn horse, discovering it's actually gentle and smart. Now they needed to go to the main gates. Someone had been stopped from entering. Callian quickly realized what was going on. It was the person he'd wanted to find. Ellen doesn't have an invitation to the party, so he's being kept out. The guards don't seem to know he's an important mage. Even so, they're blocking him. Ellen thinks guests get treated based on how they look. The prince realizes the mage is doing it on purpose, like he's looking for a reason not to step onto those grounds, already ready to leave. The butler said they can't follow him because they'd be disobeying the king's orders. Callian can't lose the mage's trail, so he told his butler to hold the guards back, then spurred his horse toward Ellen. The knights ordered the prince to stop immediately. The king's order forbids anyone from leaving, but the kid jumped past them on his black horse, heading outside the fortress. Now the butler has to do something to stop the guards, because he got a clear order to prevent that from happening. Full of energy, he told the knights to stop immediately, because the prince had permission from Siegfried. Finally, the butler revealed who he really is. His name is Siroyan, Duke Siegfried's eldest son. Later, someone is laughing hard about what happened. It's the butler's father, impressed by his son's cleverness. When he left their lands, he was just a little kid. It was a good decision. The boy is afraid the relationship between the duke and the king might get strained, but Siegfried is sure nothing will happen because the king won't ask any questions. He overthinks everything. If the prince got help from that family, he definitely won't be punished. There's a delicate balance of power there, so it'll all be ignored like it never happened. Whatever reason drove the young prince outside, Ellen noticed he was being followed, like he was about to get criticized. So he asked what the third prince of Kyrus was doing, chasing after him. Callian already knew that once you reach the 7th circle, aging slows down. The kid said it was late and asked if the mage was really leaving. The mage said when he tried to open that door, there was a huge barrier. That irritated Callian a little, because the mage didn't even seem that interested in staying. Callian said he tried the wrong door because there was already a place open for him. The mage realized he was being called out, and instead of listening to excuses, he saw he was dealing with a very sharp prince, someone who doesn't seem like he's only 14. That's when the mage noticed something. He stepped closer, genuinely worried. The moment he touched the prince's hands, energy started to rise, making the prince feel a sharp pain in his chest. The mage's mana flowed through the prince's body. The contact got so intense that Callian had to pull away. The mage said that even with doors shut, you can't completely block the wind. The kid's condition had been exposed to this master. Callian said there's a limit to how much mana he can use, but that isn't his real problem. The question is whether the mage has already figured it out. Ellen kept looking at him with interest. Even though they're dragon descendants, Kyrus looks down on mages, and Ellen's presence had been completely ignored. But now he believes fate brought him to this boy, so he asked why the prince wanted to meet him. Callian knows he can't lie now or he'll be found out. Very politely, he said he wanted to talk because he believes his life will be in danger soon. The third prince is hated by everyone. His existence is surrounded by enemies. Ellen put a barrier around the two of them that blocked all sound, and he did it without any chant at all. Thinking it over, the mage asked what the boy's goal really is to avoid what's coming, or to get rid of the real problem. Callian said the priority is stopping something worse from happening, for now, and if he has to take the throne to get what he wants, he'll do it. Ellen seemed to like that confidence. A young prince who needs a mentor to reach his goals, that's genuinely interesting. That's why the mage asked to be invited again. The prince knelt in front of him, introducing himself to his new mentor. With the mage's ego properly stroked, he agreed to save the prince. Back with the butler, he asked his father if nobody knows about his real identity, because it would be a problem if it leaked. Siegfried is very confident, but his son stays worried. He wanted to know how Leah has been lately. His father said she's doing great, handling the family's internal affairs, the position the boy abandoned. Whenever he wants to stop playing at being a butler, he can come back anytime. Realizing he won't see his son for a long time, the Duke listened as the boy said they'll see each other again in 3 months. Siegfried took that as his son leaving his current post. The boy said that soon a young master will turn 15. His father asked if he knows what their surname means. They're known as the Elephants of Kairos. They never wanted the throne, but they're extremely powerful. They're the kings of beasts and nobody can lay a hand on them. After saying that, Siegfried started smiling, saying their name carries real power. Then he told his son to do whatever he wanted, which made the boy genuinely happy. He said next time, he shouldn't make him worry so much. The butler fixed his clothes to return, very formal. He said goodbye to his father, saying they'd see each other soon. Siegfried thought his son was stubborn. Typical of the family. He was also thinking about what the prince did earlier. If he can pull something like that off, he must have grown a lot. Now the Duke wants to know what the third prince is planning. The next day, a carriage caught everyone's attention. It had an emblem with 7 roses and a silver staff. People wanted to know why that family was visiting Karis, but the reason seemed obvious. They have a good relationship with the king, and rumors were spreading. Ellen had just stepped down from the carriage. His young disciple had made it happen. The night before, they talked about exactly this. The mage needed to arrive at 9 o'clock. Competing with the Brizan family's influence won't be easy. It's time to shake up the nobles. The servants of that house welcomed the mage politely and said the king was already waiting. In the meeting, the king was surprised by the mage's presence, and Ellen asked for a place to stay. To compete with his wife's power, the king knows having that mage on his side would be very useful. It's surprising he showed up there first, and it made the king suspicious. The mage said that the night before he found a small black cat with red eyes. He realized it was very smart and decided to teach it a few things, but he still didn't have anywhere to stay. The king asked what he was going to teach, and the answer couldn't be more obvious: magic. But the environment also needs to help that little cat improve, so the owner of those lands needs to contribute too. A bit uneasy, the king asked if the mage can really do that. Kalyan will be his disciple. Nobody can stop it. The king decided to cooperate. That place is already a mess. One more thing won't make it worse. Still, the king was intrigued, because he'd heard the third son had nothing special about him. That surprised the mage. Even the boy's health condition is unusual, because it's hard to find the cause. To make it worse, the king only talks about things he's heard, like he doesn't even know his own son. So the mage asked if the father knows the young prince's height, something basic. From the king's silence, the mage immediately realized he couldn't answer. Then he told him attention can be poison, and indifference can be medicine. But in this case, saying you're busy is just an excuse. The king got irritated but decided to let it go, since the mage still doesn't know how to behave as the boy's mentor. He said it's ridiculous to have to explain this, but he cares a lot about the young prince, insisting he's exceptionally special. Just as their conversation was about to be interrupted, a magical barrier was summoned. Ellen told the king to pay attention. The boy looked sick. Even the clothes he put on had been urgently altered, since he'd lost weight. He can barely get himself up when he wakes. If the king keeps doing nothing but watch, he's going to lose that something he claims is so precious. It's almost lunchtime, and the young prince still hasn't left his room to eat breakfast. The butler said he'd handle it for him and bring some tea. Our protagonist stays in bed in a lot of pain even while he's asleep. Watching that, the butler figured the day before must have been exhausting. That's when the mage showed up and saw the boy still hadn't woken up. The mage's presence threw the butler off. But then he was completely terrified when Ellen appeared out of nowhere. Siegfried Jr. tried to stop the mage from getting closer. He told him to give our protagonist some time because his health was fragile. But the mage recognized that boy right away. They'd met a few years earlier. And he knew he was looking at the baby elephant. Looks like some people know who the butler's father is. The butler swore his disguise was perfect, but he still got found out. Our protagonist finally woke up, but he had no idea how many hours he'd been resting. He was told he had a visitor. Kalyan saw who the mage was, and the boy received a small gift from him, some pills he had to take every day. Ellen said the boy was dealing with 2 problems. The first was that he couldn't control his own mana. The second was that his body was losing weight way too fast. Kalyan was impressed by his teacher's ability to notice things. Ellen asked if the boy really had the power of the blessing. Kalyan said yes, because of it, he should recover faster and have an affinity for magic. But somehow his regeneration seemed messed up. More and more intrigued, Ellen asked if the boy had never found that strange. With healing mixed with magical power, in theory the boy's heart should be strong. His teacher agreed. The blessing hadn't disappeared, and his heart didn't have any issues either. Actually, his regeneration was being used constantly, just somewhere else. That statement completely shocked our protagonist. He immediately realized he was being poisoned, and if it weren't for his blessing, he would have been dead a long time ago. Fighting a poison that strong was pushing his body to its limit. Because of that, using mana was extremely difficult. Our protagonist knows that originally, that boy was the victim of a murder, but he'd already been getting poisoned, something extremely well planned. Knowing all of this fills him with rage. Ellen noticed the negative intent coming off him. A 14-year-old shouldn't be capable of that. Callian believed that little pill was the antidote. His teacher said he'd made it in a hurry, but it should be enough. Our protagonist started thinking about what would happen if he took it while still taking in the poison. That worried his teacher, because then the treatment wouldn't work as well. Keeping the poison in his system would be very dangerous, but the boy already had an idea who the culprit was. It had to be the tea he drank every morning. Since he drank it in front of everyone, it would be easy to confirm he'd ingested it. Maybe the boy discovered that in his past life, and that's what sped up his assassination. Things are very different now. Callian needs to find out what's going on while keeping everything secret. His teacher asked if that was the only option. The boy needed to confirm the tea was the source of the poison. That could put his servants in danger, because the culprit does it regularly. Confident they'll never be caught. Knowing the butler's real identity, the teacher said he'd be safe, but he understood Callian's fear and wanted to know what the next steps would be, somewhere mysterious. A disgusting old man said that to use his trump card he needed to receive something. The next day, Callian wanted his teacher to accompany him outside. Some servants went to find Prince Planche, because the queen wanted to see him. She said the boy was very late, but he didn't seem to care at all. Drunk again, the young man drank some water and told his mother to just say what she came to say and leave. The queen had heard our protagonist had gotten a mentor, Ellen the 7th Circle Mage. That news was spreading among the nobles. Planche couldn't care less. The queen told him he had to appreciate the investment she'd made. It was time to get ready. A lot of eyes would be watching the heir from now on, so he'd better not disappoint them. Planche got furious and threw a cup at the floor. Even though he hurt himself, he kicked the servants out. Now he was more and more irritated with our boy, the source of his frustration. Because of the king's birthday celebration, the royal party was touring the capital, and his children were traveling with him too, making the people extremely excited. Callian was the one the crowd most wanted to see. The butler asked if he was feeling okay. At least his face looked a bit healthier. Callian said he'd been resting well. Thanks to the antidote he was taking, breathing was much easier, and the pain in his heart was gone. Unfortunately, the schedule that day would be long, which made the butler very worried. Still, the protagonist was healthy enough to see his subjects. In the middle of the crowd, a man tried to hide. Our protagonist noticed those mysterious figures. He would never forget them. They were people from his past life. That knight who sacrificed himself to protect him, Kiri. But a hooded man disappeared into the crowd. Our protagonist tried to follow on horseback, but the butler stopped him. Callian tried to explain that he needed to go after them, but they were already gone, and it would look terrible to abandon the caravan at that moment. One thing he was sure of, he would meet his friend again. At the end of the route, a noble welcomed the king and his family. He said he'd prepared a performance to celebrate their arrival, Baron Melfier, the one responsible for organizing this outing and all the stress our boy had felt. In his past life, a horseback outing was organized by that baron, and one of the king's sons got hurt, which led to Melfier being hanged. It's a shame because he seems like a pretty polite background character. The hall was already prepared to receive the guests. Our boy had already spotted the chandelier that was going to fall. For an event held for the king himself, it was weird that the knights hadn't checked the safety. But thinking about the commander, Callian realized he shouldn't expect much from them. He decided he'd give that background character a chance to live. When the baron approached him, Callian said he was worried about that chandelier and ordered it to be inspected. Obviously, that message left the noble totally confused. The horse performance was happening in the arena. The noble was like a kid, sitting beside the king. He didn't want to miss this chance for anything. But then he noticed our protagonist's expression and started thinking he really should have checked the ceiling. When he inspected the place, the baron found a badly worn rope. If it weren't for the young prince's warning, something terrible could have happened. But he'd been warned about what was going to happen, like our protagonist knew the future. Callian noticed the noble acted very wisely. The question was why. Bryson had guards in that area enough to cause a huge commotion. That more alcoholic prince said the noble didn't know his place. The performance continued in the arena. Looking at our protagonist, the drunk prince said he was disgusted by his bloodline. Everyone there heard it, and it only made our protagonist more motivated, because he never thought the crazy king from his other life would turn out to be such a useless person. It was time to find out how far the queen would go in this situation. She didn't like what happened either, because she'd already warned her son not to be stupid. Only then, after looking at her own son, did she understand he'd done it on purpose. But that day was special. Many nobles were present. It was time to make a decision. The show for the nobles finally ended. The accident that should have happened was prevented. The queen stayed very quiet, like she hadn't planned anything at all. Maybe that accident really wasn't part of her conspiracy. That had been debated in his past life too. It could have been driven by outside forces. It seemed designed to be discovered. A direct attack on royalty. Bryson benefited the most from the fallout. As they left, our protagonist asked the butler where that baron's wealth came from. He learned the man had a diamond mine. If the baron was removed from the board, Bryson would thrive in that market too. Our protagonist was putting the pieces together, but he decided to watch a little longer. He thought about pressuring the baron a bit, since our boy had saved his life. So he told the butler to cancel all plans after the performance. He said the comments he'd heard from his own brother were intense, and he was shaken. That was why he wouldn't be able to take part in the rest of the schedule. The king was in his office, thinking about what happened. Since the mage had scolded him directly, he started remembering the boy's mother, her final moments, until servants interrupted, announcing the queen's arrival. One maid said she'd bring tea for them. The queen noticed someone had visited before she did. The king stopped the tea, saying the queen would be leaving soon. Getting straight to it, he asked what brought her there. She asked what would happen to Bryson after that event, but she was worried about her son's behavior. It could damage his place in the line of succession. She praised the day's festival and suggested the baron should be rewarded. The king realized she already had something in mind. Smiling, she brought up Bryson's exclusive right to supply horses to the royal family. To the king, she was giving up a very important asset, which only backed up what Ellen had said. Ellen said the queen wouldn't give up the royal guard over that, because she wasn't desperate, but she would hand over something valuable, and the king should act like he hadn't expected it. After hearing the proposal, the king said he would enter Planche in the next event. That made the queen deeply happy. That night, the king came to dinner accompanied by his son, to reward the baron for what he'd done that day. The nobles already knew that was the deal between the king and the queen, because of Planche's actions. Because the protagonist's fame was growing, his room got flooded with gifts. His rival's influence was shrinking. But he didn't need that kind of offer except for the baron's gifts. He would donate everything. It didn't take long for the butler to find the baron's gifts, a very flashy necklace made with red stones. It was so big it looked like it was made for a horse. That confused our boy, and he learned that when the baron approached, the butler had said our boy liked the black horse. That's why he received the necklace. It had to be the baron testing his intentions. If he accepted this gift, he'd get another one later. Talion thought the man didn't understand the value of his own life. Those jewels weren't enough, so he decided to send a message. He wanted to know the value of the necklace because he was going to buy it. The butler didn't understand the offer, and our boy said he wasn't fascinated by it. Actually, a very sinister plant had caught his attention. It was a gift from the Mages Association, and our boy found that really strange, but it had to be valuable because it came with an explanatory letter. When the plant dies, it releases its pollen. Our boy seemed to understand why it mattered. He said the gift would stay in his room, because he had a very interesting idea he wanted to try. Later, he deliberately spilled the tea and pretended he'd burned his hand. The butler asked some maids to clean it up. Some of the tea spilled onto the plant. That made the butler worry the plant might be affected by the tea. The protagonist said it was fine. It's not like the tea was poisoned. Way too specific of a comment, and it scared the maid. With his teacher beside him, our boy thanked him for the help he'd been getting. Thanks to the antidote's effect, Ellen noticed our protagonist looked much healthier and much happier. Ellen also wanted to take a walk like that. It was the first time in a long while. Callian asked if the king had allowed it, but the king probably didn't even know what was going on, since he was always busy. Our boy hurried out, leaving behind a very worried butler. The mage asked if he was still taking the medicine. Callian promised he was doing exactly what he'd been told. The person delivering the poison was very worried, since the plant had been used as bait. That surprised the mage because it was an interesting strategy. The gift our boy received had been used brilliantly. Now they needed to split up again, since the protagonist wanted to do this alone. The Mages Association was on a nearby street. That's where the teacher would be ready to help him. Soon they'd meet again, once they did what needed to be done. Some blacksmiths were working hard. Our boy got a dagger to defend himself. It would be useful from now on if he was attacked. What he needed now was more information. In his past life, several agents were sent into the field for that purpose. Trained assassins got missions like that, assigned through the King of Secretia. In his past life, our protagonist did the same thing. On that dark street, he was completely unprotected, and he knew the assassins from his kingdom were very capable. Some drunk men were approaching him. He had to be careful not to reveal his true identity, otherwise he could trigger an attack sooner than expected. The truth was, his exotic appearance appealed to him, so he had to be even more cautious. He finally entered a very peculiar shop, much bigger than he expected. Inside, the seller asked if the boy was looking for a carrier pigeon, but he said he didn't need those birds, which looked like they were sleeping peacefully. It even seemed like they'd come from far away and were exhausted, and there was no better place for them than that shop. More and more intrigued, the old man asked what brought the young man there. Callian said he needed to feed his birds. In the blink of an eye, he was attacked. The blade passed close to his hood, and the old man said he hadn't sold birds recently, so he was very careful and suspicious. Callian quickly realized that wasn't an ordinary old man. It would be hard to fight him in that situation, so our boy decided to talk instead. He said the birds he was looking for had left a nest far away, so they needed food. They hadn't been sold. Birds was a code name for secret agents responsible for gathering information. Not even Secretia's agents knew everyone out in the field, so information wouldn't leak. The old man asked if the boy was someone's bird. Callian even considered using his former father's name to pretend he was a working bird, claiming he was there on Nebulade's behalf. That left the old man very surprised. Everything was going well so far. Our boy asked for a bit of food, because this bird needs to work. The old man immediately told him to follow. He led our boy into a secret room and said the young man must be a new recruit, and that he should remember the old man's codename, White Eagle. Our protagonist said he was Red Swan. It was time for him to get the information. For each piece of information, he had to hand over an item, payment up front. Our boy didn't expect to be charged before even saying what he was looking for. It could be a trap. But the old man said the price was fixed. After paying, he got the information he wanted. Looking over that scroll, Red Swan started wondering if it was really correct. But based on what he'd asked for, that was what the old man had to give him. Before leaving the shop, he was warned to be careful, because that place is pretty cruel. Our protagonist agreed, thinking that nothing there was more dangerous than White Eagle himself. On the way back to the castle, our boy saw several hooded men. He needed to cross that bridge, but he was stopped. He asked what it meant. One of the men apologized and said he had to wait because the dead were making their final journey. Only then did he realize it was a funeral ritual. Our boy got off his horse to show respect. Funeral customs are very different in that nation. They place red flowers into the river so the dead won't lose their way. In his past life, they did it with white flowers placed on the grave. They bloomed at night, a sign that the dead would never meet the living. Our boy started thinking about it, whether in his past life anyone had mourned him, or whether time rewound before that happened. Maybe he was the dead person who'd lost his own way. Someone thanked him for stopping out of respect. Now he could continue. Back on his horse, he pulled the hood away from his face and said he would say a prayer for that soul. And the man who had stopped him noticed his face. That man's companion saw he was distracted, and asked why. Arkson said he would remember the Prince of Secretia very well because that's what happened in his past life. Answering his companions, he said the young man seemed like a kind person. On his way, Callian saw several signs with the name Sisfanian and thought it was a bit over the top, especially since the last one looked like a bar. The stories from his past life about that city were true, about the followers of Sisfanian. A bald man was going to take our boy somewhere more private, but Callian said that wasn't where he wanted to go. He wanted the 4th floor of that building. The bald man was immediately surprised and quickly offered to show him the way. Callian was now in an empty hall. He saw a small object hanging on the wall. When he was with White Eagle, he'd asked for just one piece of information, where illegal business happens in Kairos. After he triggered that strange object, a secret door opened in the wall. There was a staircase leading underground, where our boy would gather more information. Some people were gambling down there, but that wasn't what he was looking for. Deeper inside, the illegal fights took place. People cheered intensely for their favorite fighters. The first match ended. The winner was Stoneface. While the loser's body was dragged away, the bets were paid out. The smell of blood filled the place. That was where ordinary people threw away their humanity for the sake of brutality. To our boy, it was disgusting and pathetic. He was approached to pay the entry fee. At that moment, Callian noticed a silver-haired girl. It looked like she was mute, and she was trying to guide him to where he should go next. He noticed the tips of her ears had been cut, and she didn't look comfortable in those clothes. Around the necks of those girls was a tracking device so they couldn't escape. The mute girl gestured again, pointing to the number 27. It seemed like she wanted him to place a bet now, so he blended in with the crowd until he could get what he came for. The rule there was simple: if you win your bet, you get money fast. Our boy made a small fortune. Some men started talking about it. It was time for a special fight against an undefeated fighter. So far, his opponent was a rookie. This was the person Callian wanted to find, the one who in his past life said he'd been trapped in a place where he had to fight to survive until his sister died. The knight Kiri, but right now he was still a slave, a gladiator, the real treasure Callian had come to find. Without hesitating, Callian bet everything he had on that fighter, leaving the mute girl stunned, a risky bet that left the onlookers shocked, thinking the boy had to be crazy and they weren't wrong. Up to now, Kiri hadn't won anything. A veteran gambler said what our boy did was reckless. It wasn't worth betting everything on someone who'd never won, but our boy wouldn't budge. He told the mute girl to make sure the bet went through. After that, the veteran gambler did what his conscience told him to do, warn the rookie. That fight was going to be a complete massacre. Even inside the cage, Kiri realized what had happened. The undefeated fighter said that crazy bettor was about to lose everything. The shackles holding them were unlocked. The fight had barely started, and Kiri was already forced to defend against devastating blows. Every block hurt almost as much as taking a clean hit. The gladiator landed a strike to Kiri's stomach, making him spit blood from the impact. Now the protagonist started to get nervous. Without a sword, he knew Kiri wasn't that dangerous, but he believed in that fierce fighter's potential. The gray-haired knight's strikes weren't fast enough. He was getting crushed, slowly. There was nothing to do during that beating. The final blow was headed for his face, until the protagonist shouted to Kiri that he shouldn't expose his shoulder during the opponent's attack. The gladiator listened, managing to dodge a strike aimed at his skull and finding a good opening to counterattack, crushing the thug's ribs. If the guy's bones weren't made of rubber, they definitely cracked. Kiri turned into a dentist, pulling teeth without anesthesia. To everyone's shock, Kiri got his first victory. No one could explain how it happened. It shouldn't have been possible. While desperate screams rose from the people who'd lost money, Kiri looked at our boy. Callian couldn't hide how happy he was. Then a very suspicious bald man said someone wanted to talk to our boy and told him to come along. In a private room, someone said our boy had real talent. He'd turned 3 coins into a total of 6,000. And that was a big problem for a betting house. That man didn't want to pay him. Callian thought they were going to propose some kind of deal, but they were even dumber than they looked. The mobster asked what the boy could offer in this situation. Our protagonist said that if he took the hood off his face, things would get very bad for him. The mobster doubted the threat. It was time to rip that hood off by force, but one of the mobster's hands was violently pierced. That made our boy ask what was going on. He thought he was talking to dangerous criminals. That was when they realized they were dealing with someone truly unhinged. To their relief, our boy said he wasn't interested in the money. He'd rather take the gladiator Kiri home. But the mobster wasn't happy about that, because the slave had started bringing in money. Still, within seconds he realized that if he didn't agree, things would turn ugly. He started thinking it would be easy to see what that boy could do using his men. With an even more destructive cut, the protagonist made it crystal clear who was in charge there. He said he was willing to take the coins and even that man's life if he was crossed. It was time for the mobster to decide. After that aura strike, the answer was obvious. He ordered his men to bring Kiri to the room immediately. What he didn't know was that it had been a bluff. Our boy couldn't repeat that strike. His weakened body wouldn't handle it. A thug said there was a big problem. Kiri wouldn't leave unless his sister came with him. Our protagonist remembered the rest of the story. His knight had lost something precious in that place. Callian started to show he was getting impatient. That made the mobster move faster, saying everything would be prepared so they could leave as soon as possible. But our boy held out his hand in a threatening way. He wanted the entry fee back, the amount he'd paid to get in. Now that they were back in the dark alley, Kiri was a little worried. Coincidentally, his sister was the mute girl. They thanked our protagonist for the help, but they couldn't understand why he'd helped them. Callian handed his cloak to the girl and told them to be less suspicious, because he didn't have any bad intentions. That was when his face was recognized, the face of the third prince. Kiri apologized for having suspected someone so important. Our boy told him not to bow his head like that, because they didn't need to do that in his presence. Those siblings had elf blood, they were hybrids, and their lives had already been doomed. Taking the opportunity, our boy said that exposing the shoulder like that is something beginners in fencing do all the time. Now the question was whether Kiri wanted to become a knight. The young man said he wanted to become a sword that could protect everything he cared about, not a knight. Our boy said the first step was to work as his shield. If he wanted to keep going down that path, he should come find him. And he gave the young man a sword. Kiri still didn't know why he'd been given something so important. Callian, smiling, said he needed a good sword. It was time for him to repay everything he'd received in his past life. Ellen was reviewing the most recent events, and how our boy had saved that baron's life. The prince knew the chandelier was going to fall. Our boy went to meet his master. Ellen asked if he'd gotten into trouble, because some of his clothes were missing. The young man said something had happened, but it wasn't a fight. His teacher understood it. Must have been a difficult task. Callian admitted it had been a very long day. He'd found his knight and set a trap to find whoever was poisoning him. Even so, he was still really anxious, maybe because he'd done too much in too little time. With the help of magic, Ellen began pouring some tea. Our boy said it finally looked like a mage's office. His teacher asked if he'd been expecting some mysterious soup made with monster meat, and honestly, Callian had expected something more impressive. The room was very ordinary, and the dagger without a sheath was a strange decoration. But the boy quickly realized what kind of tool it was. Ellen asked if the prince knew why it was there, because it shouldn't be in his room. With a simple movement of his fingers, the dagger started to move, heading straight for our boy. A bit of blood hit the floor. Ellen noticed that even with a damaged body, our boy still had good reflexes. He defended himself, but he'd pushed himself too hard. That was a magical tool made by Siphanian. It copies the hidden weapon of your opponent. Basically, it was a warning. Our boy realized the attack had been a bluff. Ellen confirmed with his own eyes that besides knowing how to use a sword, the boy could use aura. From the first time he saw him, he was sure their meeting had been strange. But even more absurd things kept happening. The boy didn't match what they thought they knew about him. When he learned he was being poisoned, instead of being scared, he was filled with rage, and after the incident with the Baron, it was time to tell his teacher the truth. Ellen used healing magic on the boy's body. His teacher probably already suspected his identity, but it was more likely he was trying to believe him. So our protagonist said he wasn't Callian. His real name was Baron Secretia. My god, I didn't expect him to reveal that he broke rule number 1 of every regressor story. Now the two of them talked more about the artifact called the Axis of Time. It seemed the real Callian truly wasn't alive anymore, the professor believed. Our protagonist wasn't sure. He still felt the presence of someone else. He hadn't been sure before because it was so confusing. Ellen remembered the first time they met, our boy said he wanted something above the royal throne. Now Ellen wanted to know what that was. Callian revealed he wanted to stop the war from happening. He didn't know why Planchet was after the Axis of Time, but if the root of the problem stayed, history would repeat itself. Ellen asked whether our boy wanted to act because of his own motivation, or because of his brother Chase. They needed to figure that out. Chase was the only heir of the other kingdom. There was no one named Baron in this reality. That information shocked our boy. He didn't expect that he wouldn't exist in this timeline or anywhere, which was foolish of him, because he exists right now. Even so, the boy fell into a bizarre existential crisis, believing something had gone wrong, maybe because of the artifact's power. Now he tried to understand why he was in this body, since he felt the old Callian's presence slowly fading away. Our boy even wondered if someone had entered the body that used to be Baron, and he came to the conclusion that there can't be two versions of him in the same place, so he must have taken over the real Callion's body. His teacher said Chase was already preparing to take the throne. The future of this reality was being changed. It wasn't for the third prince of Kairos to worry about those things now, because Chase would follow his own story. Baron realized he shouldn't cling to the past anymore. He understood his teacher's concern, but he was going to make one thing clear. His teacher's fear wouldn't come true. Because when he woke up in that land, he completely got rid of everything that made him Baron. Words so heavy they left Elon stunned. Now the protagonist asked if his teacher was okay. After hearing all that, Elon, even though he was confused, still didn't understand his student's worry. And from the beginning, he'd made his alliance with one person. Our boy. Outside, Callion asked if his teacher already knew about the axis of time. From his reaction, it seemed he knew something. Elon said something had happened last year. Chase had asked him the same question. All he knew was that the artifact wasn't made by humans, and a month ago he learned it had disappeared from the kingdom, possibly on the day of our boy's regression. That information scared Callion a little. He didn't know why the artifact might have vanished, but that wasn't a question that could be answered now. However, there was someone who might have that answer, someone the prince would meet soon. Elon pointed to the statue of Cephanion, and our boy realized his coming-of-age ceremony is happening soon. Rosalita is the name of the event, when royal family members have to find Cephanion's empty nest, and inside it speak with her will. But to do that you have to make it there alive, meaning he needs to figure out who's trying to poison him. Callion believes that just this alone should have already led to someone getting caught. Back in his room, he went to examine that plant. Even though the butler was worried, everything went exactly the way the protagonist planned. Now it was time to find something seriously cool. Heading straight to the terrace, the butler questioned why they needed to go out there since it was freezing outside. That flower he'd received as a gift, when it dies, its pollen spreads through the air and very few people know it has that trait. The tea was poured somewhere everyone could see. Callion watched everyone's reactions closely. That was a deadly poison. Hardly anyone would survive it, and the plant should definitely have died. And yet, it was completely healthy, like someone had swapped the specimen. Finally, the butler understood what was going on. The pollen from that plant was drifting through the air. A trail left behind showed where the plant might be hidden, and it would lead the protagonist straight to the culprit, pointing toward the palace of Hesia, where coincidentally the queen of that kingdom lives. The protagonist watched the rain fall through the window. The butler slowly approached. The boy asked if he'd rested well, looking perfectly healthy. That left the butler stunned. He wasn't used to being greeted like that in the morning. The boy said he'd woken up early. That was genuinely unheard of for the butler. And the boy kept a close eye on the cup of tea. As he drank, he noticed it tasted different than usual. Celise had increased the poison dose. The boy asked if there were any events that week with all the nobles. The butler told him there would be a conference next week, and right after that, a huge banquet. The perfect day to stop drinking that poison. The protagonist took the antidote right after the tea, which made the butler curious. He asked what it was, and the boy said it was just vitamins. Since his body had been getting weaker, he should take them. Now the butler grew thoughtful, staring at the teacup. The whole thing made him deeply uneasy. After what happened at the horse presentation, Planche stopped coming to breakfast. For the protagonist, that was great. It removed obstacles from his schedule. Taking advantage of his second brother being there, Callion said the flowers would bloom soon. A heavy silence fell between them, and the blonde boy decided to leave. Then the butler asked why the boy had brought that up. Callion said he'd seen some roses while walking, and it reminded him that Randall used to grow roses. There was no hidden meaning behind it. Later that day, the protagonist trained a bit more. His physical condition kept getting worse, and he was sure that if he stopped training, his body would deteriorate even faster. He still didn't know how his master showed up there, but the teacher said he'd spoken with the king. That made the boy say he had two questions. He needed the identities of two people, nothing complicated for his master. The second favor was to investigate some nobles who might be involved in this, especially the Brizon family, which his teacher had already expected. That wasn't hard either, but the boy was giving his master a lot of orders. Callion said the poison was even more concentrated now. He'd really found the culprit. Even the teacher already suspected who it might be. It must be hard to hide something like that from a great mage, and since it was an important matter, it was the perfect situation for Ellen to gain even more influence. The mage thought he was going to be used as a shield, but the boy didn't want that. He wanted to use him like a weapon. He still remembered his past life, and the White Demon Army made up only of mages. In the future, Callion wanted a battalion made only of that kind of soldier. The teacher was intrigued, and said mages aren't knights, and they're hard to train. But the protagonist insisted it was possible, which left his teacher deep in thought. Romain had been ignored when he had that idea because people thought it was impossible, yet he pulled it off. Still, he died soon after, under very suspicious circumstances. The Mage Corporation really did become a military force, used by Planche. Things were going to be different now because the Brizon family wouldn't get in the boy's way, and he wanted to use the poison tea to negotiate with Queen Celise. Ellen wanted to know how that would be put into practice. All the boy could say was that things would happen soon. It was vague and it made the teacher uneasy. Pulling something hidden in his sleeve, The boy said it should be used when the queen made a mistake, then the negotiation would begin. The infiltrated maids increased the poison dose, but the queen was still furious. She was already hearing too many rumors, and it all made her deeply irritated. Someone approached the two of them. It was the queen's son, who was also a tool in her hands. He came to tell her not to worry about it, but she said he wasn't capable of deciding anything. Even so, she kept suffering. Blanche stormed off feeling useless. The queen saw her own son as weak, and she was going to pave the way for him to become king in the future. On the day of the celebration at the palace, Kiri noticed her sister woke up in a great mood. She was excited about what was going to happen too, and using sign language she said they were going to see the prince. The girl liked the protagonist and was looking forward to that day's party. Kalyan was getting ready in his royal clothes for the nobles' conference. There was 1 hour left before it all started, and the protagonist had a favor to ask his butler. It was time to settle this. The tea that was being delivered to the weakest prince. The boy finally met the queen. From now on, everything would change. Outside, the butler was on horseback. He'd been given 2 envelopes, one to deliver to Ellen, and the other to the Mages Association. The first stop had to be the association, and the butler started to worry because his lord was going to the banquet alone. The boy said he was going to handle it this way, telling the butler to stay calm. But that was easier said than done. Something like this had happened before. Even while thinking something catastrophic could become real, the butler held on to optimism. Inside the Mages Association, a woman had already prepared everything. It was a huge amount of information, said Aurea, the president of that city's association. But since it hadn't been revealed until now, it seemed suspicious. Ellen believed it was the result of political power. More and more intrigued, Aurea wanted to know how the prince was going to use those materials. Right then, the butler arrived at the association, and when he found Ellen there, he realized his job had gotten easier. He finally delivered the letters the boy had written. Ellen was already preparing to travel, heading straight to where the banquet was happening. The butler said he couldn't enter without an invitation. That was when the mage said the protagonist was at risk of not surviving until the next day. In the letter, Kalyan said he was going to make a deal with the queen, using his own life. If anything went wrong, Ellen would need to fix it. Exactly 1 hour earlier, the negotiations had begun. Kalyan told the queen they needed to be honest. She agreed, but didn't believe anything would change. Faced with her overconfidence, Kalyan told her to mind her manners. Thinking he only wanted to argue, the queen stood up. Disappointed, she'd thought she'd be entertained for a few minutes. Before she left, Kalyan said he knew about the poison tea. He asked for it to stop being served, calling it disgusting. Shocked at being accused, the queen said she didn't know what he was talking about. Expecting that answer, the boy came prepared, so she wouldn't do it again in the future. He brought a small container. Inside was a poison that stops the heart for a few moments. It doesn't react to silver and can't be detected by magic. Since the boy has the power of a blessing, his heart wouldn't be affected by it, but even that has limits. The poison needed to spread through his body. The first question the protagonist raised was, who would they suspect first? The queen started smiling like she'd lost it. She said things wouldn't go the way the boy wanted, because this wasn't her first time. She even said she was the one who took the life of the protagonist's mother. That made the boy furious, and he asked what he should do with that tea. The queen suggested he drink it all. As he drank the cup, the boy said her words would be taken as a refusal. That made the woman smile, believing no one would suspect her, because not even the king could control her. Celeste believed there was nothing she couldn't get in that kingdom. That's how she got the throne. All she had to do was remove the obstacles in her way. But there was still one thing she hadn't achieved yet, and she was working to make it happen. The protagonist started coughing hard after swallowing the poison until his body collapsed to the floor, badly weakened. The king and his brothers panicked over the boy. While they called for a healer, the queen smiled at the scene. Chaos broke out at the banquet. People thought someone had tried to poison the prince. Even if it was possible, nobody could say for sure. The nobles fell silent. Raising suspicions in that room could be deadly. Celeste was impressed with her own power. No one dared say she was guilty of anything. The king rushed to the boy, desperate. Lifting him into his arms, he begged him to stay awake. The boy tried to speak, struggling. It made the king remember his late wife and the last vow she made that he would take care of the son they had. A memory Romain never forgot. Celeste, despite all the commotion, announced she was returning to her own palace. Furious, the king asked if she was involved, shouting her name loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone at the banquet went speechless. The queen couldn't believe it. Now the nobles truly started considering that something had happened. Hiding her face behind her fan, she said she didn't understand the accusations and claimed the boy was always sick. That only made the king angrier, because it was exactly what she'd said when the queen died, when she gathered all the kingdom's knights. The same scene repeated years later. Sayaz took advantage of the fact the protagonist had been a very sickly child. She used the chance to say someone else had been present at breakfast, the second prince. Hearing her accusations, the king ordered her to shut up, but she was shameless and knew how to act. She said she was worried about his children. She said it like she were a mother figure to the boy, which offended the king even more. Then someone unexpected spoke up. Planche said his brother was fine and he'd never felt there was anything wrong with his health. He even remembered the protagonist used to tell them there was nothing wrong with him. Finally, the priest arrived to examine the boy. After being humiliated by her own son, Celeste left the banquet. Using healing magic, the priest tried to do something, but something unexpected happened. A magical barrier made by the boy's teacher. It looked like he'd arrived at the crucial moment of the night. According to Ellen, that would kill the boy. The king grew even more terrified, because his son needed urgent treatment. Then they were told the boy had a magic circle in his heart. Combined with holy power, he would die with no viable options. The king became more and more desperate. Ellen said a healer with nature power could do it, but with magic alone, it would be impossible. Even the boy's teacher was having flashbacks. His own son had been struck by something similar. The scene was repeating for him too. His disciple was about to have his life cut short. The expression on his face was the same one his son had worn once. Ellen hadn't expected to need that spell a second time, one that makes the target feel no pain at all. Obtundant was the name of that witchcraft. Outside the city, pamphlets started falling from the sky. The truth about the Brizan family and the 37 people they killed. It sparked outrage. People now wanted revenge for what the queen did to the boy. The rumors set the population on fire. Ellen, now speaking with the king, said the Mage Corporation needed to be created. They had to use the situation where the queen was the guilty one, and coincidentally he'd already been thinking about creating the Mage Corporation. Celeste, waiting to speak with the boy, didn't know when they prepared something like that. To her surprise, the protagonist was fine, even after spending a week on the edge of death. Still, he was weak, but he pushed himself as hard as possible to show strength, not weakness. For some strange reason, they were negotiating again. The boy said her deadline was over. After a week, the situation was different, and in fact, the queen was more willing to listen and accept proposals now. Callian gave a mocking smile, saying Celeste had forgotten something important. Her permission was useless now. Furious, Celeste asked what he wanted. He asked for the Knights of Pabel. It was time to get rid of that military force. That scared the queen, because it was her biggest asset. To continue, Celeste would have to give up what was essentially her personal guard. Callian called for his butler, Siegfried Jr., who brought some documents, a contract guaranteeing the queen's word, and one of the clauses involved her death if she broke it. Done through magic, it would destroy the heart of whoever disobeyed. The second prince went back to taking care of his roses, and he found out the queen went to speak with Callian as soon as he woke up. Before Clean lost consciousness, his eyes met his brother's again, another time. Our boy had said the flowers would bloom, a sign that all of this had been planned. Now that he knows what actually bloomed, the second prince is thinking about cooperating. Even Planche can tell our boy has recovered. Things are changing fast. Celeste doesn't want to make that magical oath, but to Callian, the only way to negotiate with a woman like her is with real consequences. He's just waiting for her to say the word. After thinking it over, furious, Celeste grabbed a quill to sign the contract. The magic quickly started spreading through her body, showing the contract had been sealed. For our protagonist, this is the perfect situation before she leaves. Callian admits he never had a good relationship with his brothers, and that Planche didn't take that stance to help him. He underestimates what he doesn't understand. And if he'd said anything more provocative, the king's sword would have taken his head off without hesitation. After a long silent moment, Celeste finally left. Ellen went straight to see his disciple, who had woken up. Especially after hearing the queen had been there, it didn't take him long to realize Callian was starving, happily eating several bananas. Our boy said he did his part, and he's glad about it. Ellen said they got lucky. The half-elf siblings showed up at exactly the right time. That girl uses nature power as healing. Callian really took a massive risk, and even he agrees because he didn't know Hina's potential. That left Callian speechless. Not even in his past life did he know, because the girl died young. That only makes Ellen angrier because that boy's plan was unbelievably reckless. Even so, Ellen handed Callian something he'd asked for, the elf siblings' documents. They needed an official last name, and Ellen chose Baron, the old name of our protagonist. It's a small detail that made our boy really happy. Making them citizens of that land makes everything so much better. But Ellen said the idea was actually Romaine's. Rumors that the king cares deeply about him are spreading more and more. Callian realized that's something someone else should have felt later. While he was thinking, our boy asked the butler for a few more bananas, but Siegfried Jr. had something important to say. He can't keep working as a butler anymore. Now there's a flashback about the butler. He's going to see his brother, who looks extremely weak, covered in bandages. They talk about the noise the birds made that morning. During the summer, the older brother, barely hanging on, asks Siegfried Jr. to play violin for him later. The butler overheard adults talking. His brother's condition was getting much worse. Back then, he didn't really understand what it meant to not be able to have something, or to be someone who would never get to have it. After a while, his brother asked him for the truth, asked if he was dying from that illness. Then a fire happened there. They had to evacuate in a rush. It was caused by the butler's older brother. That was his way of leaving a world full of pain. Winter came, and eventually summer returned, along with the birds singing, but nothing was the same anymore. Siegfried couldn't stand seeing his son isolated, so he forced him out of the room. That was when the butler saw a little boy in the square, the nation's third prince, our protagonist. That was the day the butler decided to become a butler. He told our boy everything, and even though he was someone close to him, he didn't know anything about what had happened to our protagonist. To make it worse, it was his hands that delivered that poison. feeling horribly guilty about everything because of that, because he didn't know anything. Callian almost died, and he doesn't want that to ever happen again. Seeing the butler drifting off, Callian shouted to get his attention. First, he told him to say who he's looking at right now. It's the protagonist, and that's proof he isn't going to die. The butler has always been at his side, and this isn't the time for Callian to lose his banana peeler, because with his help he's managed to endure everything up to now. There's one thing our boy is sure of. He knows he can trust the butler with anything. Siegfried Jr., everything up to now, is crying now like a child, realizing he still won't be able to go home because he found someone he'll protect for the rest of his life. After pulling himself together, he promised he'll find everyone who persecuted our protagonist. Callian said if he's going to get revenge, he should stay quiet, because elephants make too much noise. The butler tried to take it back, saying he won't make that much of a scene, until he realized the word Callian used for him, elephant. That means Callian already knew everything. The butler wants to know since when he's known the truth, and our boy dodged the question. At least they went back to acting normal, leaving what was behind them. Our boy got pulled into a moment of intense introspection, where he saw himself, the former owner of this body, approaching him, walking his path toward who knows where. It felt like a thank you and a goodbye. Callian is falling, drifting farther and farther from that strange moment, until he finally wakes up in his own room. He held a mourning ceremony, lighting a candle for the old Callian, who is now gone for good. Our boy said the old Callian seemed like he was in a hurry. He gave him the life he has now, but wished that our protagonist could achieve what he wants. For the old Callian, life was a prison, which makes our boy envy the freedom he must be living now. But so much has happened already, and he can't abandon it halfway through. Our protagonist decided he'll live this second life to the fullest. The Knights of Pable were dissolved and returned to Bryson territory, and the announcement about the Mage Corporation has just been made. After 3 months, our protagonist's servants concluded they'd need to call the tailor, because our boy has grown a lot. When he went to meet the king, Romain was impressed by how tall the young man was. They're making preparations for Rosalita, since it's Callian's birthday. Ellen said he has someone to introduce to his disciple, the mage who will handle his security during the ceremony. Arsene introduced himself and said he's honored to have that responsibility. His presence almost made Callian have a heart attack. Romain said he's an excellent mage from the corporation, because he's very talented. Our boy feels flattered, recognizing it was a big surprise, while also trying to hold back his anger. The Mage Corporation is almost ready to be established. Practically speaking, they still need a name, and there are still lots of adjustments to make. While the meeting is happening, Callian can't stop looking at Arsene. Ellen asked the king if he has a name suggestion, since he'd been thinking about something like this for a while, and he does. Valken. His answer came so fast that Ellen felt relieved. He asked before suggesting anything himself. Our boy wants to know what Arsene thinks. The mage looked a little confused by the question, and Callian clarified he meant the name Valken. What does he think? Still a bit cautious, Arsene said, it's a good name, and that's what got chosen. Later, using a silence spell, our boy told Ellen everything that happened in the past involving Arsene. Even though Arsene killed him, there's no need to change guards now. The situation changed, and people changed too. Even so, our boy still holds a deep grudge over what happened. The one who came to see our boy was Baron Melfier. It's been a while since the last time. Our boy apologized for stopping contact, but Melfier feels deeply honored to be in touch with the third prince, since he hasn't associated with any noble so far. But our boy got straight to the point. He came to collect the reward for saving the man's life. In every sense, the Baron was expecting something like that. He's been trading diamonds and even horses with the imperial family, but the prince seems eager to hear something else. Melfier said he still doesn't have anything to give him, and that made Callian smile. Our boy asked if the noble could run another kind of business, and Melfier said he has the people and resources for it. The problem is Bryson has that too. The Baron was confused because he thought he had Callian in his hands, but Callian said it very bluntly, and it was unexpected. Our boy smiled and said that's true. Callian said he's going to establish a mage unit. They have people and resources, but they need management. Melfier asked if that's the cost of his life. Our boy said yes, that's the price he wants. Full of loyalty, Melfier is ready to report for duty to someone who was supposed to die at 15. Callian not only changed everything, he's also surrounded by people he can trust. All that's left is to find Sifanian at the ceremony and ask why all of this is happening. During his birthday celebration, Callian realized everything is properly prepared. Even that jerk brother is there, and it's been a while since they last spoke. As Callian walks away, Planche calls him Blood Eyes. Our boy said he won't tolerate that anymore. His name is Callian. To his surprise, Planche said that isn't Callian, because he rides horses, uses swords, and even talks back. Planche wants to know who he really is. Callian also needs to remember he isn't Baron anymore, and that Planche isn't the crazy king he once knew. First, he has to wait a little longer, until he learns from Sisfanian what really happened. Looking at his brother, he said he has a lot of wild ideas. Ellen said Planche might be an alcoholic, but he isn't stupid, so it makes sense he found it strange. With time, Callian realized his brother's suspicion will grow. They need to deal with that. Ellen reminded him that now he's Callian, and nobody else, and that's exactly what our protagonist decided. Still, it isn't easy to forget he was Baron once. The mage tossed something toward his student and told him to catch it, a communication ring, so he can be advised when needed. It doesn't work where Sifanian's power is present. It's useless in the castle, but outside it works normally. Ellen also reminded him that everyone in that hall is his people. Commander Johann introduced himself. He leads Siegfried's men, and they'll protect Kallian all the way to Sifanian's nest, which is in their territory. They're genuinely impressive, and they don't seem to like the fact their young master works as a butler. Siegfried Jr. asked if our boy needed anything before the trip started, and in front of all those knights, Kallian asked the butler to bring him something to drink. To make it worse, the butler asked if he preferred tea. Once Kallian decided, the butler told him to wait a moment. Kallian obviously noticed those knights are really bothered by it. Ellen can't understand why his disciple seems to make enemies on purpose in the city. This ceremony seems very important, something rare. The big caravan is ready to leave. Blanche is still watching everything closely. The queen won't be coming with them, but she stays deep in thought. Our boy is going to travel with his master's approval. The Rosalita ceremony has just begun. Knowing what's happened recently, the king is worried about his son's safety. Ellen said there's no need to worry that much. Romain finds that confidence strange, and the great mage said he didn't say anything special, but that's exactly the attitude that makes the king even more worried. Kallian looks at the communication ring, and since there's no response, his master must be inside the palace. The butler keeps being extremely attentive, and that only fuels the knight's anger. Siegfried Jr. had already said something about it. Kallian can't use magic, and his sword skill isn't that good, so the knights need to be even more careful, because the young prince is basically a defenseless child. That only makes the knights even angrier. They're hoping young Master Siegfried will quit this lowly job soon. They still have to travel for 3 more hours. The butler suggested they stop to rest, but at that exact moment everyone went on alert. Kallian realized this isn't that kind of situation. From the middle of the forest a girl appeared, asking for help. She isn't an ordinary person, she's an elf. After being rescued, she said her name is Sia, and that she's hungry. She'd been hiding in the forest. Kallian started to feel that first contact with her was really strange. The commander asked what they should do. Kallian told them to feed the girl. He also said that if she was being chased, she should have said so earlier. A hooded man on horseback is approaching. Kallian pulled a hood over the girl and told them to hide her. When the stranger got closer, they asked who he was. The man said he was chasing a thief. The commander said there were no strangers with them, but the man quickly spotted the child being hidden. He told the knights he wasn't there to cause trouble and asked to take a look. So Kallian asked what the person he's looking for looks like. The wanderer said it's a young elf, and Kallian told him to search for that. The girl panicked, and the wanderer headed toward her. As he passed by Kallian ordered him not to turn around and to pay close attention. The 2 people hidden and watching weren't there to help. Their killing intent is aimed at the wanderer and the child. Once he confirms where she is, arrows will be fired. The wanderer looked back in desperation and arrows were already flying. But all of them were stopped in midair by our protagonist, because he even warned the wanderer not to look back. The possible ambush put all the knights into combat mode. Arxen put up a protective barrier around the protagonist. At least he's useful for that kind of thing, even if Kallian doesn't like him. The arrows stopped coming. The attackers must have run. Arxen said he'll take care of the child, and told Kiri to help our boy. Going over to our protagonist, Kiri saw something dangerous. That wanderer is about to cut the young prince's head off. Shocking everyone there, our boy blocked the attack pretty easily, and even used magic to counter, slamming the extra to the ground. The knights didn't imagine our boy wasn't useless. Looks like the prince can do more than they expected. The butler was obviously terrified and started scolding our boy. He could have been seriously hurt. He said our boy isn't that good with a sword and not that good with magic either. But the knights who saw everything strongly disagree. Someone useless wouldn't have been able to do that to the wanderer, and not that easily. After that, it was time to talk to the elf child. When asked what she stole, she said Luca did it. She didn't do anything. Kallian can't interrogate the child. She looks really shaken, so he called Arkan to help. It's on him to understand everything the elf is saying. After a brief interrogation, Arkan looked exhausted. Salas works in the Heriska forest, and she travels with Luca. It looks like he stole something from those men. The 2 of them got separated while they were escaping. On top of that, the girl answers before anyone even asks her anything. She doesn't know why it happens. It feels like some kind of clairvoyance, but she says it's not exactly that. Arsen has the tough job of keeping an eye on the child. Kallian is going to leave her at the next forest so they won't be slowed down, and it'll be up to the lord of that region to investigate what happened. At that moment, the commander came over to talk to our boy. There was something really suspicious mixed up in that wanderer's things, and he showed the artifact to Kallian, who was surprised too. Our boy knows exactly what it is. It's the poison he's been taking every day for a long time. Now he wants to interrogate that wanderer personally. Now that he's locked up, the wanderer said he thought our protagonist was just some young noble but realized he was wrong. Kallian answered that he's even more special than he'd imagined. Showing a small sample of the poison, our boy said he's not going to push for an answer. He wants the truth. He asked if the wanderer knows what it is. The wanderer said all of them had a bit of it. He thought it was something useful, so he stole some too. Our boy asked what those people were looking for. The Wanderer said he isn't sure because they were wearing masks. That left Callian deep in thought. It doesn't seem like the Wanderer is lying or trying to protect anyone. But if our boy figures out what the problem is, he might be able to help this man since he's the very precious son of an influential family. The Wanderer said his wife is in Hansen village, and those people know where she is. Callian promised he'd protect her no matter what. He also learned those men had dropped small marble stones about the size of a fingernail. He also heard they needed to be checked by a priest. Callian thought it might be a relic used by the priests of Tensel, and Tensel has been searching for sacred relics, so if they lost something valuable, they must be worried. Now the question is why they have that poison. It's used by Secretia's secret agents so they won't be exposed if they're captured. The Wanderer also said he heard what they called their leader Blue Nightingale. It sounds like a code name, and it surprised our protagonist like a bird name tied to his father, and it's somewhere nearby. A heavy rain started pouring down, and it stopped our protagonist from moving forward, so he had to stop in Latland territory, which he didn't like. The lord of that place was already drunk, happy about our protagonist staying there. Hale is sure it's a blessing from heaven that forced him to serve the third prince. Earlier the butler asked if our boy remembers Count Hale. He'd sent our boy a gift before, one of the ones that got returned. He used to support Prince Randall, then switched his support to Planche. Our boy sees him as a social climber. Hale said he couldn't even sleep after hearing rumors our boy was in the area. Even the Count's butler looked embarrassed about it. Arson had to interrupt the meeting because he had something to tell our protagonist. Quietly, he said they'd caught the messenger bird. Our boy